Hello everybody, and welcome to my video lecture on Sylvia Plath and her epic poem, not epic poem, but her most well-known poem, Daddy. Alright, so if you haven't done so yet, go ahead and go to your textbook, if you're in this textbook here, and go to page 639. That's where you'll find the beginning of Daddy. And also pull up the slideshow and you'll go to, I think it's slide 28, where you'll see a picture of Sylvia Plath. And I will pause while you hit the pause button if you haven't done so already, and pull that stuff up. Okay, so Daddy by Sylvia Plath. It is useful in understanding this poem because this is a difficult poem to understand. If you've already read the poem once, you know that it's difficult and your head is probably spinning right now and you're like, Mr. Smith, what the heck did you make me read this for? Well, I will explain it to you. And I hope that as you get a better understanding of the poem that you'll find it helpful in the enjoyment of the poem. Sylvia Plath's poetry has been called confessional by many scholars. What that means is the narrator is pretty much Sylvia Plath herself in just about all of these poems. There's very little separation between Plath and the narrators of any of her poems, and that is especially true of Daddy. Now, it helps to understand if you look at the little picture on her slideshow, you'll see that she was absolutely beautiful. She was a statuesque, gorgeous blonde. Her father was a German that came over to the United States and became a citizen, and he was a professor. He was a college professor at Boston University. And he married a much younger woman, Sylvia's mom, and she also became a professor at Boston University as well. So Boston University in the Boston area is a highly regarded school, very, very good school. And Sylvia Plath's parents were in that crowd. Sylvia herself was extremely intelligent. She graduated from Smith College, which is in Massachusetts as well, and she graduated summa cum laude. Now, summa cum laude is the highest of honors. There's cum laude, then there's magna cum laude. Summa cum laude means you're at the top of your class. And that's where Sylvia Plath graduated. So she was extremely, extremely intelligent. So you would think with those good looks and that intelligence that she would be happy and she'd have everything in the world going for her. The opposite is true. If you looked up the word bipolar in the dictionary, there would probably be a picture of Sylvia Plath next to it. She was prone to extreme mood swings. When she was happy, she was on top of the world. She was elated. She was the happiest person you could imagine. When she was depressed, she was suicidal. In fact, that's how her life ended in 1963. And it was her third suicide attempt that we know of. There may have been more. So she was prone to these big mood swings. It also is helpful in the understanding of this poem to understand that Sylvia Plath's father died when she was just 8 years old. And she really kind of blamed him for that death because he was diabetic. And he did not take very good care of himself. So he goes into the hospital with a foot infection, and that infection spread throughout his body, and he died from it. And Sylvia believed, probably correctly, that had he taken better care of himself, he would not have gotten that infection. He would not have died in the first place. So she was very bitter about his death and very angry at him for being so lackadaisical and taking care of his health. So that's something that can help you understand this poem as well. The other thing that can be helpful is knowing that her marriage also was a rocky ride. So Sylvia Plath graduates from Smith summa cum laude. She gets accepted into Cambridge over in England, so she flies across the ocean and goes to Cambridge where she meets a guy by the name of Ted Hughes, who was also a poet like her. And actually, he ended up, eventually, later in the future, he would become England's Poet Laureate, which is like the head poet of the country. That title used to carry a lot more significance than it does now. But when their marriage was happy, it was very happy. They did have 2 children together, but when their marriage was bad, it was really bad and abusive on both sides, physically and verbally. And so here's already a fragile creature in Sylvia Plath to begin with, and then she gets involved in a marriage which wasn't really the best thing for her, and they separated. She got custody of the kids. They separated, and she did commit suicide in November of 1963. So I think it was November 1963. Let me double check that. Yeah, let's see here. I'm sorry, it was not November 1963. It's February of 1963. So in February of 1963, she commits suicide. Ted Hughes did edit her poetry and edit some of her volumes of work after her death. But she, her marriage and the problems that came up with that will also appear in Daddy. Now, I've already said that Daddy is an extremely difficult poem to understand. Let's go ahead and go into the slideshow. I'm going to go ahead and pull mine up now. And go to slide number 29. Now, this poem was published posthumously. Now, there is a, if you go on YouTube, you can find a video recording of her actually reading this poem. And you can hear the strong German influence in her voice. Even though she was born in the United States and never lived in Germany, she lived in England. She has that harsh voice. But it was published in her posthumous collection Ariel, again edited by Ted Hughes. Now, if we go down to the bottom of this slide, this is important information as well. Sylvia Plath went on record as saying that the narrator of Daddy has what's called an Electra complex. In order to understand what an Electra complex is, it helps to understand Sigmund Freud and then Carl Gustav Jung. Sigmund Freud, in his studies and his theories about the development of young boys and the men, had a theory about the young boy wanting to possess the mother fully and to have her to himself, and seeing the father as competition. Now, this stage doesn't last very long, and not everybody agrees with this stage. In fact, he brought a lot of sexuality into it, which, you know, for a boy that's, you know, that young, sex doesn't mean anything to him yet. So people have a lot of problems with that, but it's still that complete possession of the mother and seeing the father as competition, and then having to realize, well, I have to share her with Dad. Carl Gustav Jung, because Sigmund Freud didn't care too much about the development of young girls and the women, he came up with this Electra complex. In Freudianism, when the young boy wants to fully possess the mother, it's called the Oedipus complex. And it's after the tragic Greek hero Oedipus, who, I won't take the time to explain the whole story to you, but in a nutshell, he ends up accidentally murdering his father and then marrying his own mother. And they had children together. Electra was not quite like that. Electra was also in Greek mythology. She was the daughter of Clytemnestra and Agamemnon. Now, Clytemnestra was the product of a rape. Leda, this beautiful mortal, was raped by Zeus when he was turned into a swan. Or actually, he turned himself into a swan. And raped her. And she was a human woman that laid 4 eggs. And one of these daughters was Clytemnestra, who would go on to marry Agamemnon, who was the military leader of the Greek forces in the Trojan War. So Agamemnon survives the Trojan War and comes back home, and Clytemnestra has fallen in love, because, you know, the war took 10 years. Clytemnestra has fallen in love with another man during the 10 years that he was gone, and she had an affair with him. So when Agamemnon comes home, she draws him a bath and then murders him in it. So here's a man who survived 10 years of warfare only to have his own wife murder him. Electra was one of their daughters, and she was so upset about this that she helped plot the revenge of that murder and was instrumental in the murder of Clytemnestra. So in that whole psychosexual development thing of young girls, Carl Gustav Jung, building upon the work of Sigmund Freud, came up with the Electra complex. And so the narrator of Daddy is experiencing this Electra complex, and Sylvia Plath has gone on record as saying exactly that. So let us go through the poem now, because again, this is not an easy poem to understand. But if we go through this, and this may take a little while, So if you need to take a break and get a drink of water or something, come back, and then we'll go ahead and go through the poem stanza by stanza. All right, so let's go through the poem itself. All right. So we open up with, you do not do any more black shoe, in which I have lived like a foot for 30 years, poor and white, barely daring to breathe or chew. The black shoe. Already she's starting to make references to Nazism and the abusive ways in which the Nazi, the Gestapo, the Nazi police, treated anyone that was not like them. So here she is already feeling crushed underneath the weight of this black boot. And she feels like she's a foot inside of it. Now, shoes can serve two purposes. One is they can protect the feet. If you step on a nail with a shoe, the shoe hopefully will stop the nail from actually penetrating the foot. So they can have that protective quality, but at the same time, it envelopes and confines the foot as well. And so already, from the very opening stanza, we get the idea of being crushed under a boot. All right. Daddy, I have had to kill you. You died before I had time. And we're going to stop right there with those two lines. Daddy, I have had to kill you. You died before I had time. Let's think for a minute as we go through this about the development of a young girl into a woman of her own. At some point, the young woman must, or the young girl in her development into a young woman, must make a break from the father in order to be her own person. Now, it doesn't mean she doesn't love her daddy. There are 50-year-old daddy girls out there. But it does mean that she needs to become her own person, and she will eventually, of course, replace the father with a husband at some point. So, he died before she had a chance to fully develop. So when she says, I have had to kill you, she doesn't mean literally. Although this whole death thing, meaning getting over the dad, will reappear towards the end of the poem. I don't know if you made that connection. But he died before she had a chance to fully develop from a young girl into a young woman. So she did not have that fatherly presence in her life that was needed for that. And she's a little bit bitter about it. Okay. Marble heavy, bag full of God, ghastly statue with one gray toe, big as a Frisco seal. Wow. So we've got a marble heavy bag full of God. We've got some kind of a ghastly statue with one gray toe. And that toe is as big as a Frisco seal. There are lots and lots of ways to read this portion of this stanza. All right. Marble. What is a tombstone made out of? So think about that for a minute. Her father has died, and we've got a tombstone. So we've gone from the had to kill you, but you died before I had time, into this marble-heavy tombstone. Bag full of God. Who is the bag full of God? Or what is the bag full of God? Her father, right? I mean, that seems kind of obvious. For those of you that go to church, when you go to church, aren't you in awe of God? Don't you go down to your knees for Him? Isn't He an awe-inspiring presence in your life? Sometimes for little girls, daddies can almost have that kind of awe-inspiring power in a girl's life. So here is a bag full of God. Our narrator is in awe of her father. Ghastly statue with one gray toe, big as a Frisco seal. Now we got double meanings here. How did Otto Plath? Otto was Sylvia's dad. How did Otto Plath die? Well, it started with a foot infection, and the foot probably swole up. So there could be some kind of what we call hyperbole, which is a bit of exaggeration about the toe swelling up to the size as a Frisco seal. But also, we now have a marble bag full of God with that's a ghastly statue. Think of a marble statue. If the toe of that statue is as big as a Frisco seal. How big is the entire statue? If you've ever seen shows like Lord of the Rings, or if you've ever seen Game of Thrones and seen these humongous statues of the kings, as boats go by them in the river or people walk by them, maybe she sees her father, a statue of her father that is humongous, like 10 stories high, with this big toe as big as a Frisco seal. That's how awe-inspiring her father is. All right, let's go to the next one. And a head in the freakish Atlantic, where it pours being green over blue, in the waters off beautiful Nauset, I used to pray to recover you, Ach du. Ach du is German. Ach du means like oh me, or oh you, I'm sorry, it means oh you. So Ach du is oh you. So obviously Nauset, by the ocean, by the Atlantic Ocean. Nauset is a part of Massachusetts. I used to pray to recover you. Now, I'm hoping that most of the people out there still have their father. And if you're one of the students that lost your father at a very young age, you probably understand this part of the poem a lot better than anyone whose father is still alive. But imagine losing a father at 8 years old and having to pray, please, God, give my father back to me. Please, God, it was too soon. Give me my father back. And the father never comes back because, the father's dead, so obviously the father can't come back. So she's praying for this father, and he's not coming back. And it is disturbing to her, and she's angry about it. Okay? Still got that anger issue. Still got that daddy like a God issue. All right. Now, she's going to make, after she says, oh, you, in German, she is now going to switch focus. And she's going to look at her dad's German heritage. Now, during World War II, obviously, he wasn't around. Because Sylvia Plath was born in, I want to say 1930-something. Okay, where's it at? She was born in 1932. So, and he was already a naturalized American citizen by then. So her father was never a Nazi. Her father did not fight for the German cause. During World War II, he would already have been dead even, because the war broke out in 1939. Okay, so maybe when Germany invaded Poland, he was still around, but he only lived about a year or so after that. So, but because of his German heritage and her memories of his thick German accent, she's going to now think of him like a Nazi. So, in the German tongue, in the Polish town, again, remember, Hitler invaded Poland, took over Poland, and caused all kinds of atrocities to occur there. Scraped flat by the roller of wars, wars, wars. So, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie The Pianist. If not, if we were in a classroom situation, I would probably show you a scene from that. But unfortunately, we're not in a classroom situation. But he leveled a lot of the buildings in Poland. Warsaw and Krakow and other towns, other Polish towns, were completely flattened by bombs from the airplanes, which came from the Luftwaffe, which the Luftwaffe actually makes an appearance later, and the tanks, they were called Panzer tanks, that would actually blow the towns apart, and then they would roll over the rubble and the bodies and everything like that. So, these towns were flattened, and it was war that caused all of this. But the name of the town is common. My Polack friend says that there are a dozen or two. So not just one town, lots of towns in Poland got wiped out. And the Jews in those towns got put into what were called ghettos. If you've heard ghetto referred to a poor neighborhood now, that term comes from the areas of Poland where they would cram 100,000 Jews into an area which was only designed to have about 10,000 people living there. So, and he's saying, well, This was nothing to the Germans. One town was just like another. All right. Put your foot. Oh, I'm sorry. So I never could tell where you put your foot, your root. I never could talk to you. The tongue stuck in my jaw. All right. So since there are a dozen towns like this, she never knew where he set down roots or where he stepped. And then I could never talk to you. You see, she is so intimidated now by her dad. So first she was in awe of him like of a god. Now she's starting to bring in the German Nazi imagery. And the Nazis were very, very scary, terrifying people. And so because of that, she is terrified of him and she cannot speak. She's so scared she cannot speak to him. Her tongue is actually stuck in her jaw because of that. All right. Excuse me. I'll get this. Okay, here we go. It's stuck in a barbed wire snare. Ick, 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 ick. I could hardly speak. Barbed wire. This was one of the methods in which the Germans would contain any prisoners they had, whether it was in the ghettos of the Polish towns or in the concentration camps. Barbed wire kept people inside that were, destined for destruction, if you will. Ick, 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 ick is German for I. So imagine yourself stammering for a minute. Imagine yourself, you're scared to talk to somebody, and you're like, but I, like that, right? Especially if you're protesting something. You don't know. Well, that's what she's doing here. Her tongue is stuck in her jaw, snared by the barbed wire, which was used as a way to imprison victims, and she can't speak. All she can do is, keep stammering. I could hardly speak. I thought every German was you, and the language obscene, an engine, chuffing me off like a Jew to Dachau, Auschwitz, Belsen. I began to talk like a Jew. I think I may well be a Jew. I think that part is kind of self-explanatory. She is naming, so the train imagery, the German language is obscene, like a train sound. The trains were how people were transported from their homes into the concentration camps. She names 3 of them here. And so she's talking like a Jew now. In fact, you know what? I think I may be a Jew. So, Daddy, you're a Nazi concentration camp guy. I am a Jew. And this is a scary situation. There's fear there, and there's the fear of destruction. All right. Now, the snows of the Tyrol, the clear beer of Vienna, are not very pure or true. So the snows of Tyrol, which is kind of like a ski resort in Germany, very white, very pristine, very pure. The clear beer of Vienna, made from the freshest water, so clear you can see through it. And yet, none of these are pure or true, mainly because of the fact that they're in Germany, and Germany was not exactly a pure country, at least not the leaders of Germany. With my gypsy ancestress and my weird luck and my Tarek pack, I may be a bit of a Jew. Okay. Tarek pack, of course, means a tarot pack. So gypsies. Gypsies were another of the undesirables, if you will, in Adolf Hitler's perfect Germany. So, just like any Jew was hauled off, gypsies were also captured and hauled off, because gypsies were just, in his opinion, really bad people. And one of the things gypsies would do would be fortune telling. That's one of the ways they'd make money. So a gypsy would lay out a tarot, a pack of tarot cards, lay the cards out, tell the fortunes of those people that are actually paying them in order to get those fortunes told. And she's saying, hey, I'm a gypsy, I'm a Jew. I could be a victim. I have always been scared of you with your Luftwaffe and your gobbledygoo. And again, Luftwaffe is the German Air Force. And the German Air Force was, they could pound through their bombs, they could pound a town into submission. The first defeat of the Luftwaffe was in what was called the Battle of London. So that was a turning point in World War II. But the German Air Force was so powerful and their bombs so destructive that they were able to pound a town into submission. And then she says gobbledygook. She is actually going back to baby talk. You know, first she was like, I, like that. Now it's gobbledygook. So again, she's kind of going back into her childhood here. Kind of going back into that baby form, if you will. So there's baby talk throughout this. Now, take a look at this. And your neat mustache and your Aryan eye, bright blue. Oh, Panzerman, oh, you. So she went from Ach du earlier in the poem. Now she's saying oh, you in English this time. Ach du and oh, you are translations of each other. Your neat mustache and your Aryan eye, bright blue. Remember, the Aryan race was what Hitler thought was the pure race. And they were supposed to be blonde-haired and blue-eyed. Hitler, of course, had darker color hair. But there are color photos of Hitler that have surfaced in recent years. And in these color photos, his eyes are a deep blue. Very blue eyes. So, Plath would have known this, and she said, with your neat mustache, which nobody wears that mustache anymore. If you've ever seen an old Charlie Chaplin movie, back when he played the character of the Tramp, he had that little mustache that was only about as wide as the nose. Then Hitler had that, and since World War II, nobody wears that mustache anymore because of the evil of Hitler, and so nobody wears it. But he's got his neat mustache, he's got his Aryan, dark, deep blue eyes, Panzerman, oh you. And again, I think I mentioned this earlier in the lecture, but a Panzerman is the guy that drives a Panzer tank. So that is what she's saying. So a tank could really roll over anything it wants to, just about, and it can destroy anything in its path. So her dad is a Panzerman. Not God, but a swastika so black no sky could squeak through. Every woman adores a fascist. The boot in the face, the brute heart of a brute like you. Not God, but a swastika. Germany did not have a state religion at the time. In fact, I'm pretty sure that Adolf Hitler was an atheist. Or if he did refer back to God, he said, hey, we are God's perfect people. He might refer to God in that way, but he didn't really believe in a God. So, no God, but the swastika in its place. The swastika, by the way, used to be a religious symbol. No longer, thanks to Adolf Hitler, the swastika is now no longer a religious symbol. Now it is a symbol of hatred and prejudice and racism. But it used to have a different significance. So this God has been replaced by a swastika. Every woman adores a fascist. I can't really tell if this is irony, where you say the exact opposite of what you mean, or if she's referring to the fact that there are so many women that get involved in bad relationships and stay in them, even though their friends are saying, that man is bad for you, get away from him. And she's like, but I love him. While she's got this big black eye, she's saying, but I love him. Okay. I think there might be some irony here, though. Because, oh yeah, every woman adores a fascist with the boot in the face and a brute heart of a brute like you. So, there's some love there because he's her daddy. But, at the same time, there's that irony of, oh yeah, what woman wouldn't want to be stepped on in the face by a big, ugly boot? So, take that as you will. So, take a look at what's happening here. Because I think we're about to make another switch. Actually, we are. We're about to make another switch. So, at first, she was in awe of her daddy, and he was a god to her. He was all-powerful. Then, he became the ultimate human evil. And notice that I'm going to be talking about the ultimate human evil because there's an even bigger evil coming up. So, when you think of evil human beings, the first place people go to is Adolf Hitler and the people that worked for him, but especially Hitler himself. So now we've got from God to the ultimate human evil. Now we're going to get even more evil than that. You stand at the blackboard, Daddy, in the picture I have of you, a cleft in your chin instead of your foot, but no less a devil for that. No, not any less the black man who bit my pretty red heart in two. Let's start with standing at the blackboard, Daddy, in the picture I have of you. This is a memory. In the picture I have of you, Daddy, I'm remembering something. Now, I'm remembering you at a blackboard. Now, you may not be old enough to remember when schools had blackboards and slate chalk, but think of the same thing here, of a dry erase board or a whiteboard, if you want to call it that. So, Daddy, I have a memory of you standing in front of the whiteboard with your little markers. Dressed in your little jacket, dressed looking like an intellectual, maybe he's wearing a tie. But do you really think of college professors, myself included, do you really think of us as people that, were, what's the word here? That might fight people, or that might be good at sports, or anything like that? Most people think of college professors as nerds. People that get picked on rather than doing the pick on. And people that, have a lot of knowledge up here, but in some ways might not have common sense. Now, that's a stereotype. I can assure you, I was a great athlete in high school. But I did get picked on a lot because of my nerdy ways. So it was kind of a paradox there that I was a wrestler in advanced placement classes. But she's got this gentle, good college professor. But he's got a cleft in his chin. Okay? Cleft in his chin. Now, think about this for a minute. Instead of your foot, but no less a devil for that. Picture the pictures that we now have of the devil. Red skin, horns coming out of the head, pitchfork, and what do his feet look like? They're cleft hoofs, like a horse, or maybe a donkey, or a goat, or whatever. The devil has a cleft feet, but in the case of Sylvia's daddy, the cleft of this evil devil is not in the feet, it's right here in his chin. So now Daddy has gone from the most evil of humans to the devil himself, the ultimate of evils. And of course, bit my pretty red heart in two, of course, means heartbreak. When I was 10 when they buried you. Now, of course, this is for poetic effect. She was really 8 when her father died. But our narrator is going to say he was 10. At 20, I tried to die and get back to you. So she was 20 years old when she tried to commit suicide. She took a bunch of, I think it was sleeping pills, and crawled. This is the real Sylvia Plath I'm talking about here. She crawled underneath the crawl space of her house and just laid there ready to die. And somehow she was discovered and saved. So I was 20 and I tried to die to get back to you, Daddy. Daddy, I was so desperate for you, I was willing to die so maybe my spirit could find your spirit in the afterworld and be with you. I thought even the bones would do. But they pulled me out of the sack and they stuck me together with glue. So, of course, like I said, in this particular suicide attempt, she was discovered and taken to the hospital and saved. And stuck me together with glue. She's referring to the psychological treatments that she got at this point when she says they stuck me together with glue. Imagine breaking an object. Let's say you have a china cup and you break it, and in the course of breaking it, you take super glue and try to stick it back together. That crack is still there, right? The cup is still damaged. You may have pieced it back together, but still the damage from the breakage shows. In human terms, we get cut with a knife somewhere. There's a scar for that, whether it's a surgical knife or whether it's, like in a knife fight or whatever. So, she's saying that these psychological treatments stuck her together like glue sticks together like a china cup, but the scars are still there. The damage is still visible. She's not completely healed, even though they treated her after her suicide attempt. And then I knew what to do. I made a model of you. Now we're getting to the part about Ted Hughes. Remember what I said earlier in this lecture. There's a thought among psychologists and people who study such things that little girls grow up to be women who marry their daddies. Now, not literally marrying their daddies, but marrying men who remind them a lot of their dads. Gentlemen, that's why you need to be the best father you can to your daughters, because you want to be the role model that your daughter is going to use in order to marry the right guy. If you're a father and your daughter marries a real jerk, you really don't like that very much. And sometimes fathers will blame themselves. What did I do wrong? Well, it may have been because you were a jerk whenever you were a dad. So, she made a model of him. She found a guy just like her daddy, and Ted Hughes was an academic. He was a poet. He was in the college atmosphere. He might have looked a little bit like her dad. He might have acted a little bit like her dad. But she made a model of him. So I made a model of you. A man in black with a Mein Kampf look. Mein Kampf, of course, refers back to Hitler. And a love of the rack and the screw. And I said, I do, I do. A love of the rack and the screw. If you don't know what she means by the rack and the screw, these are medieval torture devices that are designed to torture people. Some of the Nazis at the death camps and the concentration camps tortured their victims to death rather than just sticking them in gas chambers. There were horrifying experiments, such as at what temperature does a person die when they're set on fire and things like that. So she found a guy with that Mein Kampf look who also loves to torture. And as it turns out, the torture was just like her dad. And I said, I do, I do. So, of course, that's the marriage vows, right? All right. So, Daddy, I'm finally through. The black telephone's off at the root. The voices just can't worm through. Folks, in this day and age when our telephones, you press a button either on your cell phone or you press a button on your home phone in order to get a dial tone or to end a call where you press buttons. In the old days of telephones, back when Sylvia Plath would have written this poem, in order to stop somebody from calling you, all you had to do was take the phone off the cradle and set it down beside the phone. So, you would pick the phone up out of the cradle in order to answer a call. You'd put the phone back in the cradle in order to actually end the call. And if you did not want to be reached, then you had the option of taking the phone off the hook. And if somebody tried to call you, they would get a busy signal. And that's how calls were blocked. But she's saying, Daddy, we're not communicating anymore. I've taken the phone off of its hook. We cannot communicate. If I've killed one man, I've killed two. So what she's saying here, not literally killed. She doesn't kill Ted Hughes. He survives her by many years. But by going through this process of marrying him and then leaving him and divorcing him, she is taking care of two problems at one time. Because it helped her get over not only her husband, but her daddy as well. The vampire who said he was you and drank my blood for a year, 7 years if you want to know. So what happens when a vampire drinks a person's blood? What are they sucking out of the person? Literally the person's life, right? So, this 7-year marriage literally sucked the life out of Sylvia Plath. It took all her energy away, and it took her vivaciousness away, and it was really a draining experience. If anybody you know, or maybe it's you yourself, if anybody you know has ever been in a bad marriage, you know that it can suck the life out of a person, metaphorically. Vampires do it literally by sucking out the blood, which is what sustains life. So, for 7 years, she was in this bad marriage. Daddy, you can lie back now. There's a stake in your fat black heart, and the villagers never liked you. So, how do you kill a vampire? Well, if you read Bram Stoker's Dracula or seen any vampire movies, You take a wooden stake, you drive it through the vampire's heart. That is successfully killing the vampire. So the stake has been driven into her daddy's heart now. And it happened at the time when she actually left Ted Hughes. They are dancing and stamping on you. This is a reference to Bram Stoker's Dracula again. When Dracula dies in Bram Stoker's Dracula, the villagers do celebrate. So, villagers are celebrating the death. They always knew it was you. Daddy, daddy, you bastard, I'm through. And at that moment when she declares, daddy, you bastard, I'm through, she is now over him. So, she is taken. Let's go ahead and trace this again. Her dad was like God. Her dad was like Hitler and the Nazis. Her dad was the devil. She recreated her father in a man that she fell in love with to be her husband. Married him for 7 years. That marriage sucked the life out of her. So her father basically becomes Ted Hughes. And there are some scholars that will tell you that, in fact, if you do your research paper on Sylvia Plath, you'll see this. There are some scholars that will tell you that Daddy might have been a pet name that she had for Ted Hughes when they were around their children. So now she's got 2 daddies to contend with. She's merged them into one, made him into a vampire, which is an undead person, somebody who has died and is now back to life. Her real dad died. He's been brought back to life as Ted Hughes. And then she drove a stake into his heart, and in doing so, she has taken care of 2 daddies at one time. She has gotten over her electrocomplex. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is an analysis of Sylvia Plath's daddy. And I can see by the timestamp this lecture did take a long time. But if you were really confused about this poem, I hope that this presentation here has cleared it up for you. It's really a brilliant work of art. Sylvia Plath, of course, being a brilliant woman, you would expect that. So that is Daddy. That is one woman's attempt to overcome the grief and the pain of losing her dad at such a very young age. And that's all I have.